My father screamed at me to leave his house, calling me a failure because I didn't drive a luxury car like my brother. He didn't know I'd just sold my tech startup for millions. I left without a word, but 7 months later, the bank called him. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The fever had settled deep in my bones, a heavy, aching weight that made even lifting my head feel like a Herculean task. I shouldn't have gone to the dinner. I knew that. My body was screaming for rest, for the quiet darkness of my own apartment, but the text from my mother, Megan, had been insistent. Just come for an hour, Vanessa. It's a celebration for Derek. Please. I was 34 years old, the CEO of a company that had just been acquired for $24 million in a deal that had closed exactly 6 hours ago. And yet, the plea of a disappointed mother still had the power to drag me out of bed. I hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours, the final negotiations with the buyers consuming every ounce of my mental energy. I was physically shattered, running on caffeine and the lingering adrenaline of the biggest achievement of my life. I wanted to share it with them. I wanted, just once, to walk into that house and see their faces light up for me the way they did for my brother. I parked my 7-year-old sedan at the curb, well away from the driveway to leave room for Derek's least luxury SUV. The walk to the front door felt like a mile. My skin was clammy, and a cold sweat pricked at the back of my neck. I adjusted my scarf, trying to hide the fact that I was wearing a hoodie and sweatpants, my coding uniform, as I called it, though my father, Cameron, called it hobo chic. I didn't have the energy to dress up. I had the news. That should have been enough. When I walked inside, the air was thick with the smell of roast beef and expensive cologne. They were already seated in the dining room. Cameron was at the head of the table, a glass of wine in his hand, his face flushed with laughter. Megan was serving potatoes, and Derek was leaning back in his chair, looking smug. "Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," Cameron boomed, his voice grating against my headache. "We thought you were too busy playing on your computer to join the real world." "I'm not feeling well, Dad," I said, my voice raspy. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "But I have news, big news." "Unless you finally got a real job, I don't want to hear it," Cameron snapped, cutting me off instantly. He turned back to Derek. "So, son, tell me again about the promotion. VP of Sales? That's incredible." "Regional manager, actually," Derek corrected, though his eyes darted away fast. "But it comes with a company car allowance. I'm thinking of upgrading the SUV." "That's my boy," Cameron beamed, slamming his hand on the table. "Ambition, that's what this family is about. Ambition and success, unlike some people." He cast a withering look at me. I stood there, swaying slightly, the contract, the digital proof of my $24 million exit, burning a hole in my pocket on my phone. "Dad," I tried again, softer this time. "Please listen. I just sold Vanguard. The deal closed today. It's—" "Sold it," Cameron interrupted again, his face twisting into a sneer. "You sold that little website of yours. For what? A couple of grand? Enough to pay off that rust bucket you parked in front of my house? It's an eyesore, Vanessa. The neighbors are going to talk." "It's not a website," I whispered, the room starting to spin. "It's cybersecurity, and I sold it for—" "I don't care," Cameron roared, standing up. The sudden movement made me flinch. "I am sick of your excuses. I am sick of you dragging this family down with your mediocrity. Look at your brother. Look at this suit. That is success. You come in here looking like you slept in a dumpster, probably looking for a handout because your little business failed, and you expect me to listen to your lies." "Cameron, calm down," Megan murmured, but she didn't look at me. She kept scooping potatoes onto Derek's plate. "No, I won't calm down." Cameron pointed a shaking finger at the door. "You are a lowlife, Vanessa. You always have been. You have no drive, no class, and no future. I'm done supporting you emotionally. If you're here to ask for money, get out. Get out of my house." The room went silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. I looked at Derek, waiting for him to defend me, to tell the truth about how many times I'd covered his rent. He just took a sip of wine and looked at the ceiling. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It wasn't just anger. It was a complete, total erasure of my existence as a human being worthy of respect. I do. Ent remember walking out the door. One moment I was standing on the plush Persian rug in the dining room, the next I was fumbling with my keys in the cold night air, my vision blurred by tears and fever. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice before I could unlock the car. I sat in the driver's seat of my rust bucket for a long time, just breathing. The engine was cold, and the interior smelled like old coffee and the vanilla air freshener I'd bought 3 years ago. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. The silence of the car was a stark contrast to the ringing in my ears. Low life. The word echoed, bouncing around my skull, mixing with the throbbing pain behind my eyes. I reached for my phone. The screen lit up, displaying a notification from my bank app. Deposit received, $21,400,000. The rest was in stock options. I stared at the number. It was enough to buy Cameron's house 10 times over. It was enough to buy the company Derek pretended to be a regional manager for. It was fuck you money in the truest sense of the phrase, and yet, sitting there in the dark, I felt poorer than I ever had in my life. I started the car and drove. The road blurred. I pulled over twice to be sick, my body finally rejecting the stress and the illness. By the time I got to my apartment, a modest 2-bedroom place in a quiet part of town, I was shivering violently. I collapsed onto my sofa, not even bothering to take off my coat. I needed to hear a voice, any voice that wasn't screaming at me. I called Megan. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried again. On the second try, she picked up. Vanessa, her voice was hushed, like she was hiding in the pantry. Mom, I rasped. I think I have the flu. I just needed to make sure I got home okay. Oh, Vanessa, she sighed, a sound that conveyed exhaustion rather than sympathy. Why did you have to provoke him? You know how proud he is of Derek right now. You couldn't just let your brother have his moment. Provoke him? I sat up, shock momentarily overriding the fever. I didn't say anything. I walked in and he attacked me. Mom, I just wanted to tell you guys that. Please, not now, she cut me off. Cameron is furious. He says you ruined the mood. He's talking about, well, he says he doesn't want to see you until you apologize and get your life together. He says you're an embarrassment. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the flu. He said that. He's just upset, honey. You know how he gets about appearances. Maybe just give it some time, a few months. Let Derek help you with your resume, okay? He knows people. Let Derek help me. Derek, who had called me 3 weeks ago begging for $2,000 to cover a gambling debt so Cameron wouldn't find out. Mom, I said, my voice steadying into something hard and brittle. I'm not apologizing, and I don't need Derek's help. Vanessa, don't be stubborn, she snapped. We're just trying to help you survive in the real world. The real world, I repeated. I looked down at my phone again at the balance that could change the fate of nations, let alone a suburban family. Okay, Mom, you're right. I'll figure it out on my own. Tell Dad. Tell him I heard him loud and clear. Good, she said, sounding relieved. We love you, sweetie, just try harder. The line went dead. I dropped the phone onto the cushion beside me. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly in the dim light. They thought they had just disciplined a wayward child. They thought they had put me in my place. They thought I was destitute, desperate, and dependent on their approval to feel whole. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was the one who handled the refinancing of their precious family estate 3 years ago, and my name was the only one on the deed of trust. To understand why that night broke me, you have to understand the decade of silence that preceded it. I wasn't always the black sheep. In fact, until I was 18, I was the one Cameron bragged about. I was the straight-A student, the one who organized the family finances, the one who fixed the Wi-Fi. But then I chose computer science instead of law. I chose to build things in the dark instead of arguing in a courtroom. Cameron didn't understand code. He couldn't brag about algorithms at the country club. He could, however, brag about Derek. Derek was 3 years older than me. He was charismatic, tall, and utterly hollow. He had bounced between 6 jobs in 5 years, each time leaving before he was fired, always with a story about how the boss was threatened by him. Cameron ate it up. He bylaid Derek out of credit card debt, co-signed leases for cars Derek couldn't afford, and paid for networking trips to Vegas. I, on the other hand, had bootstrapped Vance Guard from my living room. For 7 years, I lived on rice and bean. I missed vacations. I wore the same clothes until they fell apart. Every spare dollar went into servers, encryption protocols, and hiring the best freelance hackers to test my systems. When I was 28, I almost lost the apartment. I asked Cameron for a loan, $5,000, just to bridge the gap until a contract payout. He laughed at me. "If your business can't support you, it's a hobby, Vanessa. I'm not throwing money into a black hole." 2 weeks later, he bought Derek a jet ski. I never asked again. I worked 3 jobs on the side. I didn't sleep. I built my empire brick by digital brick, fueled by a desperate, pathetic need to prove him wrong. And then there was Cameron himself. My father wasn't just strict. He was a man who viewed life as a performance art. He was a retired middle manager for a logistics company, but to hear him tell it, he was a titan of industry. He wore suits to the grocery store. He leased a BMW he barely drove just to have it in the driveway. But underneath the polish, there was a rot. He was leveraging everything to maintain the image. The antagonist of my life wasn't a monster under the bed. It was a man in a 3-piece suit who smiled at the neighbors while he drained his retirement account to fund his son's delusions. Cameron had a friend, a shady real estate developer named Julian. I had met Julian once. He was slick, oily, and wore a watch that cost more than my car. Julian had convinced Cameron that the family home, a sprawling, historic property that had been in Megan's family for generations, was sitting on a goldmine of zoning potential. 3 years ago, Cameron had come to me, surprisingly humble. He needed help navigating the paperwork for a refinancing deal Julian had set up. He didn't understand the terms. I looked at them. It was a predatory loan designed to strip the equity out of the house. I stopped him. I used my own credit, which was stellar, and a small windfall from an early contract to buy out the toxic loan. I restructured it privately. I told Cameron I had found a private investor to take on the debt at a lower rate. He didn't ask who. He just signed the papers, happy to have the cash flow to buy Derek a new wardrobe. He never read the fine print. He never saw that the private investor, listed as the lien holder, was VGS Holdings LLC. My holding company. He was living in my house. He was eating dinner on a table that, legally, I could seize if he missed payments, and he had just kicked me out of it. The flu kept me bedridden for 3 days. During that time, my phone remained silent. No texts from Derek asking if I was alive. No check-ins from Megan. Just the cold, hard silence of a family that had successfully excised a tumor. On the 4th day, the fever broke. I took a long shower, washing the sickness and the self-pity down the drain. I put on a fresh pot of coffee. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account, staring at the 8-figure balance. Then, I opened the file marked Personal Assets, Real Estate. I wasn't the daughter seeking approval anymore. I was the CEO of a multinational corporation. And in business, when a liability becomes too toxic, you liquidate it. It was time to call my lawyer. The office of my attorney, Marcus Thorne, was a study in intimidation. It was all glass, steel, and a view of the skyline that cost more per square foot than my father had earned in his entire career. Marcus was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to scorch the earth, precise, ruthless, and terrifyingly expensive. I sat opposite him, sliding a thick manila envelope across the polished mahogany desk. I was dressed differently today. The hoodie was gone. I was wearing a tailored blazer, my hair pulled back in a severe bun. I felt like an imposter in my own skin, but I needed the armor. VGS Holdings LLC, Marcus read from the cover sheet, his voice dry. He flipped open the file, his eyes scanning the deed of trust I had executed 3 years ago. And the debtor is Robert Cameron Vance. My father, I said, the words tasting like ash. He thinks the lender is a private equity firm based in Delaware. He has no idea I'm the sole member. Marcus raised an eyebrow, a flicker of professional curiosity breaking his stoic mask. You own your parents' mortgage. I own the note, I corrected. 3 years ago, he was about to sign a predatory refinancing deal with a loan shark disguised as a developer. I stepped in, bought the debt, and restructured it anonymously. I gave him an interest rate well below market value. I just wanted them to be safe. And now, Marcus asked, tapping his pen on the document. Now, I said, leaning forward, I want to know why they've missed the last 4 payments. That was the anomaly. When I had looked at the VGS Holdings account, an account I rarely checked because the payments were set to auto-pay, I saw the red flags. The direct debits had been bouncing for months. My fat. Her, the man who preached fiscal responsibility like a religion, the man who called me a lowlife, was technically in default. I can initiate foreclosure proceedings immediately, Marcus said, his tone casual, as if discussing the weather. The terms are clear. 90 days past due allows for acceleration of the debt. Not yet, I said. I need to know where the money is going. His pension is substantial. He just bought a new car. If he's not paying the house note, what is he paying? I didn't need Marcus for this part. This was my domain. I went back to my apartment, my command center. I fired up my rig, the triple monitor setup that had built Vanguard. I wasn't just a CEO, I was a forensic data analyst by trade. I began to dig. Since I held the note, I had certain rights to audit the financial health of the asset, but I went deeper. I used public records, cross-referenced with the social engineering data I knew about my family. It took me 6 hours. I traced the breadcrumbs of my father's financial life. It wasn't just the missed payments, it was a hemorrhage. I found transfers, huge ones, 5,000 here, 10,000 there. They were going to an account linked to a shell company called Prestige Ventures. A quick search of the corporate registry showed the registered agent, Julian Sterling, the oily developer friend. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was the credit card debt. My father had opened 3 new cards in the last year, all maxed out, and the spending wasn't on groceries or home repairs. The Golden Horseshoe Casino, luxury auto leasing payments for a 2025 Range Rover, VIP table service Club 11. The dates of the casino charges matched the weekends Derek claimed to be on business trips. The lease for the Range Rover was in my father's name, but I knew Derek was the one driving a new SUV. My father wasn't just supporting Derek, he was cannibalizing his own existence to keep up the charade of Derek's success. The regional manager job, I ran a background check on the company Derek claimed to work for. It didn't exist. It was a landing page with a stock photo of a handshake. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was worse than I thought. My father was insolvent. He had stopped paying the mortgage, my mortgage, to fund Derek's gambling and Julian's scam. I picked up my phone and called Marcus back. Draft the letter, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in years. Notice of default and intent to accelerate. Send it via courier. Require a signature. You want to kick them out? Marcus asked. No, I said, staring at the picture of Derek on his Instagram, posing in front of the car my father was going broke paying for. I want to wake them up. The courier delivered the package on a Tuesday morning. I knew this because I got the delivery confirmation email at 10:42 a.m. At 10:45 a.m., my phone rang. It wasn't my personal cell. It was the VoIP number listed on the VGS Holdings letterhead, a number that forwarded directly to a burner app on my phone. I let it ring 3 times. I took a sip of water. I breathed in, hold for 4, out for 4. Then I answered, putting on my best professional voice. VGS Holdings, Accounts Department. Who is this? My father's voice was a bark, panic thinly veiled by aggression. I demand to speak to your manager. I just received a threatening letter from your office. You are speaking to the account manager, Mr. Vance, I said, pitching my voice slightly lower, smoother. Reference number. Reference number? I don't give a damn about a reference number. You people claim I owe you $16,000 in back payments. This is a mistake, a clerical error. I have excellent credit. According to our records, the direct debits have been returned for insufficient funds for the last 4 months, Mr. Vance. The terms of your agreement allow us to call the full loan due immediately. That is $340,000. Do you have that amount available today? This is harassment, he screamed. I could hear Megan crying in the background. I know people, I have lawyers. Who is the owner of this company? I want a meeting, face to face. Today. The owner is very busy, I said coolly. I am coming down there, he shouted. I see the address on the letterhead, 400 Financial District. I'll be there in an hour, and if someone doesn't see me, I'm calling the police. I smiled. The address on the letterhead was the new headquarters for the company that had acquired Vanguard. It was a legitimate office. My office. Very well, Mr. Vance, I said. We can squeeze you in at noon. Bring your documentation. I hung up. I spent the next hour preparing. I printed the bank statements I had uncovered. I printed the foreclosure documents. I printed the lien. I laid them out on the long glass conference table in the executive boardroom. At 11:55 a.m., my assistant, Sarah, who knew the plan and looked terrified, but excited, buzzed me. They're here, Vanessa, your father and a younger man. Derek, of course, he brought the muscle. Send them in, I said. I turned my swivel chair around to face the window, looking out over the city, imitating every dramatic movie villain I had ever seen. It was petty, it was theatrical, and it was absolutely necessary. The heavy glass doors opened. I heard their footsteps on the plush carpet. Is this the person? Cameron's voice boomed. Listen to me, lady. You don't know who you're dealing with. I am Robert Vance and I spun the chair around. The silence that followed was so absolute it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Cameron froze mid-gesture, his finger pointing at empty air. Derek, who had been looking at his phone, looked up and his jaw literally dropped. Vanessa, Cameron whispered, his face draining of color. He looked around the room, confused. What? What are you doing here? Is this a joke? Did you get a job as a secretary here? I don't have a job here, Robert, I said, dropping the dad. I didn't stand up. I stayed seated at the head of the table. I own the building. Don't be ridiculous, Derek scoffed, stepping forward, trying to regain the offensive. You live in a dump. Stop playing games, Nessie. Where is the manager? We have business. Sit down, I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the authority of a CEO who managed hundreds of employees. They didn't sit. I said sit down. I repeated harder. Cameron sank into a chair, looking like he'd been punched in the gut. Derek remained standing, crossing his arms defiantly. You wanted to meet the owner of VGS Holdings, I said, sliding the file across the table toward Cameron. VGS Vanessa Gray Systems. I bought your debt 3 years ago, Dad. When you were drowning with Julian, I saved you. I've been your mortgage lender for 36 months. Cameron stared at the file. His hands shook as he opened it. He saw his signature next to mine. He looked up, his eyes wide with a mix of horror and fury. You tricked me. You trapped me into a loan with you. I gave you an interest rate of 2%, I countered. The bank was offering you 6%. Julian was going to charge you 15%. I saved you $1,000 a month. And how do you repay me? You stop paying, you insult me. You kick me out of my own investment. This is entrapment. Cameron slammed the file shut. You set this up to humiliate me, you ungrateful little bitch. I raised you. I put a roof over your head. And now I put one over yours, I said, my voice icy. And right now, I'm inclined to take it back. You wouldn't, Derek sneered. You wouldn't evict your own parents. You don't have the guts. This is just a bluff to get attention because you're jealous of me. Jealous of you? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Derek, look at the screen behind me. I pressed a button on the remote. The large presentation screen on the wall flickered to life. The screen displayed a spreadsheet. It was colorful, detailed, and damning. What is this? Derek asked, his sneer faltering. This, I said, standing up and walking toward the screen, is a flow chart of where the mortgage money went. Dad, you claimed you couldn't pay VGS Holdings because of inflation. But here we see a transfer of $4,000 on the first of the month to Prestige Ventures. And here, I pointed to a red column. We see a payment from your joint account to American Express for $3,000. I clicked the next slide. It was a scanned copy of a credit card statement. The Golden Horseshoe Casino, I read aloud. Saturday night, $2,000 in chips, $500 at the steakhouse. I turned to Derek. Did you enjoy the steak, Derek? Was it worth our parents' home? That's private information, Derek shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. You hacked me. That's illegal. Dad, she's lying. These are fake. Cameron was looking back and forth between us, his breathing shallow. Derek, you said that trip was for a conference. You said the company paid for it. They did, Derek lied, his voice cracking. She faked this. She's jealous, Dad. She's trying to tear us apart because she's a lonely, miserable spinster. I have the IP logs, Derek, I said calmly. I know you logged into the online casino app from Dad's Wi-Fi. I know you're not a regional manager. I called the company. They fired you 4 months ago for theft. Liar, Derek lunged toward the table, knocking over a pitcher of water. Shut up, shut up. Sit down, Derek, Cameron roared. It was the first time I had heard him raise his voice at his golden boy in 20 years. Derek froze. Is it true? Cameron asked, his voice trembling. He looked at me, pleading with his eyes for me to be wrong, even though he hated me for being right. Vanessa, is it true? He has over $50,000 in gambling debts, Dad, I said softly. Julian isn't investing your money. He's using it to pay off Derek's bookies, taking a cut for himself and stringing you along. You are broke. You have no equity. You have no savings. And the only reason you aren't homeless right now is because I haven't filed the eviction notice yet. Cameron slumped in his chair. He looked old. Suddenly, the arrogant titan of industry was gone, replaced by a foolish, elderly man in a cheap suit. I didn't know, he whispered. I thought he was building a future. He was building a cage for you, I said, and you helped him lock the door. Then the phone rang. It was Megan. She must have sensed the disturbance in the force. Cameron looked at his phone, saw her name, and couldn't answer. I answered mine. Vanessa, Megan's voice was frantic. Derek just texted me. He says you're threatening to sue us. He says you're trying to take the house. How could you, after everything we've done for you? Mom, I said, putting the phone on speaker so they could both hear. Derek is lying to you. Again, I'm not stealing the house. I bought it 3 years ago to stop you from losing it. Dad is here. Derek is here. And we are looking at the proof that Derek has stolen your retirement. No, Megan sobbed. No, Derek wouldn't. He's a good boy. He's just under a lot of pressure. Vanessa, please, just stop this. Can't you just give us the money? You have so much now. Just pay off the debts and let's be a family again. Please, don't humiliate your brother. The request hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Even now, faced with the mathematical certainty of Derek's betrayal, her instinct was to ask me to pay for it, to ask the lowlife to subsidize the golden child. I looked at Cameron. He was staring at the table, shame radiating off him in waves. But he didn't speak. He didn't tell her to stop. He was waiting to see if I would do it. He was waiting to see if I would fold, write the check, and let them go back to their fantasy. That was the moment the last tether of emotional obligation snapped. "No, Mom," I said into the phone. "I won't." I hung up. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, addressing the room. I gathered the papers back into the file. "I am not going to evict you today, but I am not going to bail you out. Derek, you are going to leave. You are going to figure out your own mess. Dad, if you want to stay in that house, you will sign over power of attorney for your finances to an independent accountant of my choosing. You will cut Julian off. You will cut Derek off." "And if I don't," Cameron whispered, a spark of his old defiance trying to catch fire. "You're my daughter, you owe me." "I owe you nothing," I said, leaning in close. "I am the bank, Robert, and the bank is foreclosing on your delusions. You have 24 hours to decide. If I don't have the signed agreement by noon tomorrow, the sheriff will be at your door on Friday." I walked to the door and held it open. "Get out." The 24 hours that followed were a masterclass in desperation. My phone blew up with texts, mostly from Megan, ranging from guilt trips, "How can you do this to your own blood?" to bargaining, "We can pay you back 10% a month." Derek sent a single text, "You're dead to me." I blocked him immediately. But the real showdown happened the next day. It was my aunt's 60th birthday party, a large, catered event at a local banquet hall that had been on the calendar for months. I hadn't planned to go. I had intended to send a gift and stay far away. But Marcus, my lawyer, advised me otherwise. If you don't show up, they control the narrative. They tell the family you're a vulture stealing their home. You need to be there. You need to be the calmest person in the room. So I went. I walked into the hall wearing a dress that cost more than my first car. Heads turned. Whispers started immediately. I knew what they were saying. "That's Vanessa, the one who's suing her parents." I found my aunt, gave her a hug and a generous gift, and grabbed a glass of champagne. I stood near the back, watching. Cameron and Megan arrived 20 minutes late. They looked haggard. Cameron's suit was wrinkled. Megan's eyes were puffy. Derek was with them, wearing sunglasses indoors, looking like a hungover celebrity. They spotted me instantly. Cameron marched over, his face purple. The music seemed to fade as the guests sensed the tension. "You have some nerve showing your face here," Cameron hissed, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "After what you threatened us with." "I didn't threaten you, Dad," I said calmly, swirling my drink. "I offered you a lifeline. Did you sign the papers?" "I will never sign your papers," Cameron shouted, losing control. The room went silent. "I will not let my own daughter control my money. I am the patriarch of this family. I built everything you have." "You built nothing," I shot back, my voice rising just enough to carry. "You mortgaged everything to fund a lie. You haven't paid your bills in 6 months, Dad. I have." "Lies," Derek stepped in, taking off his sunglasses to reveal bloodshot eyes. "She's lying to everyone. She scammed us. She used her computer tricks to steal the deed to the house." A murmur went through the crowd. My aunt looked horrified. "Is that true, Vanessa?" my uncle asked, stepping forward. "Did you steal their house?" I set my glass down on a high-top table. "No, Uncle Jim. I bought the debt when the bank was going to foreclose 3 years ago. I kept a roof over their heads while Derek gambled away $50,000 of their retirement." "That's not true," Megan shrieked, clutching Cameron's arm. "Derek is a success. He's a manager." "Derek is unemployed," I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my clutch. It was the background check. "He was fired for embezzlement. He has 3 judgments against him from casinos in Atlantic City. And Dad has been paying for it all." I held up the paper. "This is the police report from Derek's last job. Do you want to read it, Mom? Or should I read it to the room?" Megan stared at the paper. She looked at Derek. For the first time, I saw the doubt in her eyes. She looked at his designer shoes, his expensive watch, the car keys in his hand. Then she looked at Cameron, who was trembling, defeated. "Derek," Megan whispered, is she telling the truth?" "She's crazy, Mom," Derek yelled, but his voice cracked. He backed away. "Don't listen to her." Show me the phone, Cameron said quietly. He held out his hand to Derek. Show me your work email, right now. If you're a manager, show me an email from your boss. My phone is dead, Derek stammered. Give me the phone, Cameron lunged, grabbing Derek's wrist. A scuffle broke out. Derek tried to shove him away. My 60-year-old father stumbled back, knocking into a waiter with a tray of drinks. Glass shattered. The room gasped. Derek stood there, panting, realizing what he had just done. He had physically shoved his father in front of the entire extended family. Get out, Cameron whispered, steadying himself against a table. Dad, I didn't mean. I said get out, Cameron screamed, a sound of pure heartbreak. Get out of my sight, you are a liar, a thief. Derek looked around the room. He saw no allies, no admiration, just judgment. He turned and ran out the side door. Cameron stood amidst the broken glass, tears streaming down his face. He looked at me. I didn't look away. I'll sign, he choked out. I'll sign the papers. The fallout was swift and brutal. Derek was arrested 3 weeks later on an unrelated fraud charge involving a fake car insurance claim. Without Cameron's money to bail him out, he had to use a public defender. He's currently serving 18 months. I haven't visited. Cameron and Megan signed the agreement. They kept the house, but their financial leash was short. The independent accountant I hired, a stern woman named Mrs. Higgins, gave them a strict allowance. The Range Rover was repossessed. The club memberships were canceled. They live a modest, quiet life now, the life they can actually afford. I didn't speak to them for 6 months after the party. I needed the space to heal, to separate my worth from their approval. I traveled. I invested in new startups. I bought a house of my own, a beautiful, modern place with a view of the ocean, where the only voice I heard was the sound of the waves. Eventually, I let them back in, but on my terms. We met for coffee a year later. Cameron looked different. He was driving a used Honda. He wasn't wearing a suit. He looked smaller, humbled. Vanessa, he said, staring into his cup, I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it, Dad, I said gently. You just live with it, you learn from it. I was so afraid of being ordinary, he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. I wanted to be special. I wanted my kids to be special, and I couldn't see that you were already exceptional. I was just looking in the wrong direction. He reached across the table. His hand was shaking. I hesitated, then placed my hand over his. I'm sorry, he whispered, for the name-calling, for the doubt, for everything. It wasn't a magic eraser. It didn't undo the years of neglect, but it was a start. Thank you, I said. I paid for the coffee. As I walked to my car, my own luxury car, bought with my own money, I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in decades. I wasn't the daughter seeking validation anymore. I wasn't the bank. I was just Vanessa. And that was worth more than $24 million.